Support for the Pursuit of Music podcast is brought to you by Brooke Mays Music. Brooke Mays Music is a family of retail specialists who unify their professional skills and talents in order to focus on the needs of music education and educators. Their main goal is to increase the number of active instrumental music makers. Their objectives include, number 1, maintain strong working relationships for the lifespan of the music maker's career, and number 2, encourage the love and participation in music, and finally, number 3, being an active advocate for support of music in the schools. The voice of music education drives our actions. Thank you so much to our sponsors, Brooke Mays Music.
We are very excited to have Dr. Jason Oliver on the podcast today. Jason is a good friend of mine that I've worked with for almost a decade.
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy to think about. So anyway, we wanted to interview Jason, go through his story a little bit. He is a successful musician in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, successful teacher, and kind of get an idea of who he is and his background. So anyway, take it away, Jason Oliver. You're from where originally?
Orlando, Florida.
Orlando, Florida.
I've already found new information. That's cool.
Yeah.
Crocodile country, alligator country. Yeah.
Yeah. I was born in a little town called Winter Park, which is right outside of Orlando. A little town that was founded in the late 1900s, I guess, for the original snowbirds, people escaping the north and coming down there. So it's called Winter Park, where people would go during the winter.
Even in the late 1800s, they were doing that in Florida? Mm-hmm. No way.
Yeah.
I thought that was like a yuppie thing from the 80s that started.
No, they've been doing it for a long time.
Huh.
No one likes the cold.
I like the cold.
I think the cold is pretty good, but not north levels of cold. North level, like when you're in Chicago in February, like I don't want that level of cold.
Yeah, the wind sucks.
Is there any seasons? Are there seasons in the town that you grew up in, or is it sort of like 72 and humid all the time?
When I was growing up, if I went to elementary school and it was 50 degrees, and which might be the high during the winter, people were all bundled up, and you know, and so it was really weird for me when I moved to colder climates in New Mexico and here, and that people were still kind of wearing shorts and t-shirts when it was 60 degrees, because where I came from, that was, you bundle up at that point. So,
right.
I lived in Florida for 22 years. So
22 years. Mm-hmm. I think most people who listen to our podcast are Texans. There may be a few that are outside of the state. So from what we've gotten from the podcast with John is that people are just interested on what band, like growing up in the band environment is like outside of Texas. And we know that Florida is becoming a competitive state, competitive state for band, but I don't know if that was always the case whenever you were growing up.
When I was in high school, my high school directors used to use or talk about Texas schools as an example. They would one of the stories they would always tell us is in Texas, every band has these metronomes, and they just blare these metronomes throughout the band hall, throughout the marching field, because that was not something that we did in Florida. No band really did it. We might have a metronome that we used for working on particular sections or cleaning particular sections, but I had no idea that they would attach a metronome to the what are they called, the long rangers. You know what I'm talking about? Those just as loud as they possibly can.
Ping metronome.
Yeah. And when I first moved here, when I started at UNT and I started private lesson teaching, it was kind of a shock to actually see these metronomes in work, because it was just something I'd heard about but never saw before. And that was kind of a shock for me.
In hindsight, where do you fall on the metronome, no metronome issue? Because obviously you're a very skilled musician now who can play with great time.
I like that.
But when you were a kid, did you ever? So was there ever a time in your maybe high school career where you felt like had you had more time with the metronome, you would have been better with as far as pulse and timing goes, or is that just kind of something that we use to make ourselves feel good?
I think that the best approach is kind of in between. When I was younger, I didn't use a metronome like a lot of my students, because I was lazy, and I didn't like the fact that it told me that I played out of time. So I didn't like to use it. But then I have the experiences I have now as a teacher, where I see that some students use it too much as a crutch,
Right.
that they can play with the metronome. You take it away, they're not subdividing in their head or in their mind, and everything is external. Their sense of time is either their foot tapping, or it's the metronome telling them where they are in the measure. And so I kind of borrow a phrase of one of my teachers that says, you want to use a metronome as a tool and not a crutch.
Okay.
And I feel like in Texas, often we use metronomes as crutches. We use it all the time for everything, and which is great. But unless it's taught correctly, the student isn't internalizing the time. They're always relying on that sound to help them find, the time. And when that's taken away, they're completely lost. They don't know how to count a dotted quarter note. They don't know how to count any type of syncopated rhythm without that little click going on.
Right.
Well, cool. Well, let's go into your time in Florida. So you're from Winter Park. Take it away.
So you started playing trombone at the age of
11.
3? Oh.
11.
3.
And I actually tell this story to my students, and part of my philosophy is to try to instill passion and excitement in my students. And I always give them the example of when I started, or what got me into band, is at my school, which was Union Park Middle School, we didn't start band like we start here at the beginning of the 6th grade year. You started in the second semester. So the first semester we had this program called the Exploratory Wheel. And what it was is you would do like 2 or 3 weeks, and like you might have 2 weeks of shop class, and then 2 weeks of home economics, and then 2 weeks of something else. And it would kind of give you like this kind of a broad spectrum. And then at the end, they would have all of the different activities that you could participate in. Kind of do a little demonstration or set up a booth. You had the home ec stuff, as I said, or shop or whatever. And then the choir and the band performed. And I remember it was about November or December, about the time we had to sign up for our classes for the next semester, or whatever this, class was that this was an alternative class or whatever it was. And the band played Louie Louie. Now, to a little 6th grader.
That's important.
Yeah, to a little 6th grader who had never experienced band before and never seen a band play. And I know in retrospect, going back, probably hearing this, the middle school band made up of 7th and 8th graders play Louie Louie would probably be pretty bad to my ears today. But to that little 6th grader, it was the most amazing thing I had ever seen. I had never seen kids my age participating in making music together in that way before. And I knew when I heard that band that is what I wanted to be a part of. Yeah. And so I immediately brought home the piece of paper and told my mom, I want to be in band and I want to play saxophone.
And saxophone.
That's
what I wanted to play too.
Yeah. Really? I wanted to be a trumpet player, and that was not going to happen. So the reason I actually ended up playing trombone was because my mom already had a trombone. So that I was voluntold. And I was crying, and I was so sad, and I still kind of cry, and I'm sad to this day.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding. I would have been such a terrible trumpet player. But anyway, so people don't know what kind of impact that those moments, like when you're at the pep rally, and perhaps there's a middle school joining, and I just want whoever listens to us that to understand that you have an impact on people that's affected you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And will continue to affect you beyond the recording of this podcast. So in those moments, don't take that lightly, that you're recording, or excuse me, you're playing something like Louie Louie or the Hey song, and you're inspiring these young kids, and it might affect them for the rest of their life. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Because when you're teaching young kids, and this is what I try to counsel my colleagues that are getting into the private lesson teaching business, is that a 7th grader or a 6th grader, they don't know the most sophisticated rep for your instrument. They don't know what, let's say, the Chicago Symphony or the New York Phil is. They don't know Mahler's 5th Symphony, but they know the Hey song. Right. They know, what's that song that every band around here plays? A Crunch Time. That's what gets them excited about music. And so at that level, I try to encourage them. I try to feed that fascination with music. And sometimes a student is not going to respond to name, the greatest trumpet player that you can think of. They don't know who that is. They don't know why that's special. But when they hear the band, if you're a sixth grader and they hear the eighth grade band play, as you said, Louie Louie or something, it's a huge, exciting moment for them that they want to be a part of, and we need to encourage that.
Yeah. So I interrupted you earlier. Do you remember what you were going to ask him?
Oh, I was going to ask. So how did you wanted to play saxophone? Mm-hmm. So how'd you get to trombone?
I turned in my paper late, and so I went to the band director, and he talked to me. And I know I'm not skinny anymore, but at that time I was really tall and lanky. And obviously the saxophone class is one of the first things that always fills up. So he looked at me, and I actually told this story at his funeral because I happened to be visiting Florida when he unfortunately passed away right after he retired from band directing. But he looked at my teeth. Now, I don't think he actually knew anything about, dentistry or anything like that. He just looked at me. He was trying to convince me to play trombone. He goes, you have long arms. And he's like, looked at my teeth and goes, you'd make a good trombone player. And I was like, all right.
Sounds good.
Okay. So that little decision made a huge impact on my life. Just the fact that he needed me in the trombone class, altered the course of my life forever.
That's amazing, I mean,
yeah.
And we all have this story. I almost played French horn because I'm left-handed. Could you imagine me as a horn player?
Yeah, you're going to an RSO rehearsal tonight, and you're playing trumpet. Are you playing principal part or second? Second, but still, just the it's like those little moments in time. Had anything gone differently, I can't even imagine where the course of my life had gone had I decided to play trombone.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so you played in. Were you successful from the get go? You knew, like, you were inspired. You were one of those younger kiddos who just took a hold of it and just ran with it, or did you have some struggle moments?
I'm one of those, or I was one of those kids that I got really into and passionate about whatever I was into at that moment, and I would move on to my next thing once I discovered it. Mm-hmm. So when I signed up for a band, my parents thought it was going to be a very fleeting thing. I'd be in it maybe for a semester or a year. So it was really the first thing in my life that I kind of stayed with. Whatever I got into, I was into full on. So yeah, that's what that was.
So whenever you went past middle school into high school, Florida has All-State.
Yeah.
Then they had it back then.
But their tiers were different. We didn't have all region in an area. We just had all county because we don't have ISDs there. It was everything is done at the county level. So I was part of Orange County Public Schools. So we had all county, but you didn't have to make all county to make all state. It was just a separate audition. And their auditions, I always felt, were a little more fair than they are here in Texas.
How so?
Everything's recorded. You would go into a school, just like you would just show up just like you would, and there would be somebody there. You would walk into the room. You would have a list of what you're supposed to play, whatever the cuts were of the etudes, and they would record them. And on the tape, they would mark down whatever your letter or number was, or however they noted it. And all the tapes from the entire state went to one person. They didn't know who you were. All they had was a sheet of, and they had to sit there and rank A through, triple Z.
Oh, Lord.
And
wow.
So
that's a job.
It's a job, but maybe they've changed it since I was there. But I always felt that was a little bit more fair versus where you have areas here in Texas that might not be as strong. Let's say in French horns.
Right.
But you have a bunch of amazing French horn players in one area. Well, only two from that area get to go to All-State when the other ones where they would have beaten out kids from other areas. Yeah. That's not All-State. That's just the best from each area, which that's just a personal
that's
thing. But I understand you want to make it fair.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the issue with our area.
So I don't exactly when it's funny because I'll hear kids play around Prosper, and I'm like, there's no way you're not going to make state. Like, you're an incredible player, and then they go and they get 8. Right. And they only take 3. And what was the most interesting thing that whenever you go to All-State, obviously you audition against the other, for trombone there was 28 that made it, so you audition against the other 27 to get your exact rank in the state. And I remember hearing some kids play at the all-state level and going, that made all-state?
Mm-hmm. I remember that too, yeah.
Yeah, it's just very strange, very strange. And then, like, all the kiddos who were around our area were in, like, the top 10. It was, like, the Austin schools and DFW. Because I knew all of them. I watched them, and I was like, hey, I know that guy, I know that guy, I know that girl, I know that guy. And you would see kids that perhaps you didn't recognize, and then they'd play, and you go, man, I don't think you would have made it past region.
Yeah.
Which is a problem, because they get to utilize the fact that they made All-State.
Absolutely.
Whereas if we had one judge, I just don't know about the practicality of it, given the numbers that were the numbers in Florida the same as they would be in Texas?
I would assume they would be pretty big. Maybe it wasn't one person, maybe it was a committee, but I know it was the same people had to listen to every tape.
That's wow.
But they didn't know where they were from. So in theory, if you had just this incredible trumpet section from one school, they could technically all make it. Now, did that ever happen? No.
Right.
But it meant that, in theory, the best of the best made it. Now, you had one chance to record. It's not like they gave you, you could record it 3 times and they take the best. So, but also it gave the judges a chance to go back and listen again.
Right, to break ties.
To break ties.
Yeah.
Because I find that when I judge regions and areas and stuff, that sometimes that's very difficult. You'll have 2 students, one that was very early in the rotation, one that's late, and I've given them the same score based on kind of my rubric, and I have to look at my notes and go, well, did this person sound better than this person? I don't really remember the first person after hearing 50 other trombone players.
Yeah.
So I have to go off of my notes, and it would be nice to be able to kind of have instant replay and go back and go, oh yeah, they did do that. They did put vibrato on that. They did shape it.
Yeah, and well, okay, so let's talk about this too, and this, I'm sure this happened, and as far as just expediting the process, I'm thinking about what it would be like to sit down and listen to recordings. If you're in a room and you're judging for All-State, can we agree that there are times when we're judging when we wish we could just press the stop button on a recording for a student and just be like, okay, you're not going to make it. You didn't prepare enough.
Yeah.
We don't need to hear the rest of this. Right? Which is what they do in the professional world. They'll cut you off if they don't think that you're...
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. They'll say that. So if you did get actual recordings... And let's say you've got your top 28. You can take 28 out of 500, and you've got 50 that are pretty good. The second you start to hear people that are obviously not going to be in the top 50, you can just go next, next, next.
Yeah.
Would they still rank everyone, even if you didn't make the?
I don't think they still ranked everybody.
Yeah. Well, that's at least helpful.
I think it was a system where it was. I've kind of imagined what it would be like if I had to do that. Let's say 500, there were 300 students. I'm sure I would start off with a yes and no pile.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And then I would take the yes pile and break that down even further
Yeah.
and so forth, and probably take me a while. But then you get down to having to be really picky on what you're looking for, whether it be technique or time or sound or what have you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, post high school. So did you make All-State?
I did not.
Wow, really?
I did not.
I would have put money in that. You would have
Well,
made it.
Florida, I was a bass trombone player full time by the time I was a sophomore, and they didn't have at that time bass trombone All-State. It was you auditioned on the tenor stuff. So it just wasn't my thing, and I was like, well,
What
I
was
always
this, back in like in the 1960s?
no, it was the 1990s. 90. I'm a class of 98,
Look at you.
so 94 to 98,
Wow.
and
This is the second time we've had somebody older than you on the podcast.
Third.
Who else?
Well, we had
Evan Jones.
Yeah.
My bad, yeah.
when I made all county band as a freshman, and I remember I was 4th chair out of 12. And I remember going up to the conductor and asking him, at that time I was in the process of switching to bass trombone. I remember asking him, can I sit last chair? And he goes, why would you want to sit? I was like, I know I made 4th, but can I sit last and play 3rd? Like I play bass trombone. I want to play the bottom stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they said no. So I had to play 2nd trombone or 1st trombone, all this stuff.
Did you have 2 valves?
I did.
That's so
I was
funny.
borrowing the schools at the time, so
That's so
it was
awesome.
before I bought my first one.
So how did you switch to bass trombone? Did you just know that was kind of where your calling was? Or?
My first teacher, or my first, well, he wasn't really my first teacher. He was my first kind of long-term teacher. His name was Roy Pickering. He was the low brass professor at the University of Central Florida. He inspired me in so many ways just by the way he played. It wasn't that or what he taught me as much as just listening to him and going, I want to sound like that.
Yeah.
He had the most rich, beautiful bass trombone sound that I would put up against anybody else. I mean, even to this day. I mean, he's retired now, but in his heyday, it was amazing. And he had technique. He was a natural virtuoso, and I wanted to sound like that.
So you took from him in high school?
In high school, yeah.
Wow, okay.
I contacted him in high school, and he took me on, and he let me play with the UCF trombone choir when I was in high school. And in fact, I'll tell you a little secret. I guess it's not going to be a secret now. I actually dropped out of band when I was a senior in high school.
Wow. No way.
What?
Yeah, I did because not because I didn't. Well, marching just wasn't my thing. Not that I'm against marching band. It was that I was in the Florida Symphony Youth Orchestra. I played in the UCF trombone choir, and I played in a couple of community big bands. Mm-hmm. So I was playing all of that, and I wanted to practice.
Right.
And so I didn't want to, at that time, I knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a performance major. Mm-hmm. And so I would rather be practicing. I still stayed in the jazz band, but I dropped out of band when I was a senior.
Did your band director lose his mind?
He was pretty upset with me.
Yeah, I bet
he was pretty upset with me. They almost didn't want to let me stay in jazz band, but the jazz band director, I think, kind of insisted. So,
but I'm sure in hindsight it was the right choice.
Yeah. See, the band that I was in, it was huge. It was University High School. We marched 375.
Yeah, that's a big band.
Yeah, we were just huge. And now that band isn't anywhere near that size because they've developed and built so many other kind of schools that have taken those students away.
Yeah.
But it was gigantic. We had like 1/10 of the student population in the band. It was gigantic.
That's amazing.
And so our thing was not doing BOA stuff. It was parades. So my freshman year, we marched in the Cherry Blossom Festival in D.C. Second year, 95, we were the Macy's Day Thanksgiving Day Parade. And my senior year, they marched in the Rose Bowl Parade. Yeah. And that was the one that I chose not to go on.
That's pretty crazy, though. That was I can't imagine your thing being parades. Like, hey, did y'all go to any local competitions or not?
Yeah, but they weren't like what we see today. And in fact, talking about a difference between Florida and Texas is I remember watching my first BOA band. School was called Cypress Creek. I must have been a junior. And it was the first time I saw, what I would call a BOA show, where it's more artistry and dancing and props. Our shows, like when the year we went to New York, it was all about Broadway and New York themed stuff, things that most people would recognize, Right. And the first time I saw Cypress Creek, it was all this artistic stuff. I didn't recognize the music. It was dancing and choreography. I didn't know what I was looking at.
Wow.
And so, but then everything, of course, now is all kind of graduated over to the more artistry side of marching band.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Have any fun stories from your time in high school band?
Besides making
anything embarrassing?
No. I did make the band captain cry a couple times.
Look at you.
What? Yeah. What did you do?
I forgot. I just didn't do something, and she got mad and then went to the directors, and they go, well, Jason's not doing what I'm telling him to do. And they said, he doesn't have to do it. And she cried.
Wow. That's crazy.
Well, so you left high school, not to hurry you along, but just to kind of move it along a little bit. You obviously went to college, and you were
a lot of college.
A lot, yeah. Yes,
been to a lot of college.
Did we mention doctor?
Right, a doctor. Yeah. So you started where?
The University of Central Florida.
Okay, so you followed your teacher from high school.
I wanted to study with him.
Yeah.
So I lived at home. It was just right down the road from my high school. Did 4 years there. Did the jazz band and the concert band and the orchestra. Everything I could do. The trombone choir there. Played in various brass ensembles and was there and got out in 4 years like you're supposed to.
Yeah.
I remember my first day of classes. It was a music theory class, and I want to say it was 45 or 46 students began. And the day of graduation, I think it was only about 5 of us actually from that class were walking the line.
That's crazy.
So, and let's see.
Well, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, did you get any scholarship to go to UCF?
Oh yeah.
So
I got paid to go to college.
That's what I wanted to talk to you about, because I also went to college on a full ride, and I want to talk to. I think it's important that the people who listen to us, if they're aspiring to go to college or in college, how to not exit college with $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 in debt.
Yeah.
Especially if you're just getting your bachelor's degree.
Well, I can go on and on about college debt because I got my doctorate and my master's with a total of about $36,000 in debt, and I've paid it off in about 5 to 6 years. So I'm out of debt.
That is incredible.
So I was very fortunate. I lived at home, but some students choose to move away. In fact, when I counsel my juniors and seniors in high school about college, I tell them that depending on what they want to do, if they want to be into music, how to be smart about it. So there's a lot of local colleges. I know it's a cool and fun, exciting idea to say, well, I want to go off to Indiana. I want to go to this school in another state. And I'll kind of break it down for them in cost and go, well, are you going to get any scholarships? Are you going to pay in-state or out-of-state tuition? I said, if you're going to be in music, you're probably going to want to need to get your master's and eventually doctorate, depending on how far you want to go. If you're not going to be, if you're going to go beyond just being a band director, if you want to be but even if you're a band director, getting that master's in education or that master's in music is important. It's a great idea.
Yep.
So that's the degree that really matters more than your undergrad. So I would tell students, well, go to a local college if you can. Live at home. It's great when mom and dad are paying some of your bills for it. Keeping the lights on, and mom's doing your laundry,
right,
and so forth. Yeah, you don't have as much privacy, and you kind of wish you were out on your own. But it was a smart decision for me.
But from my perspective, what you just said as far as privacy goes, I lived in a 2-bedroom with 4 people. There was no privacy. It doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. So unless you've got financial support from your parents, I think it's a kind of a pipe dream to think you're going to have your own space in college.
Privacy doesn't exist in a dorm.
Yeah,
no,
not at all. So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so but I was also at that time I was part of I was called the Florida Bright Futures Scholarship Program, which is if you graduated in a certain percentage of your class, if you went to a state university, they would pay a certain percentage based on where you were in your class. So mine was a 75% scholarship right off the bat. So whatever UCF was, I wasn't, having to pay room and board. So it was just tuition. So 75% of that was covered. Then I got a music scholarship. Plus, I had applied and won a couple of different music, like concerto competitions that paid small amounts, like $200 a semester for a couple of years or what have you. Right. But between the scholarships that I received, I think after I signed up for classes every semester, they cut me a check for $1,500.
Wow!
Every semester?
Every semester.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't top that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
but now,
really
my
cool.
master's, I was the jazz teaching assistant at the University of New Mexico. So I received a little bit of a stipend. I got in-state tuition, but I did take out student loans there. Mm-hmm. And I sat down and figured out how much would I really need to live. Now, I'm not saying live, exorbitantly and high on the hog or anything, but when you get or I guess you fill out the FAFSA or whatever the form is, they offer you that where they show you your maximum allotted amount of money for both subsidized and unsubsidized loans. And a lot of students just go in and just take it. They just take everything.
Right.
And then they get all this money and they just spend it. I tell people, have a budget. Eat ramen noodles. It might not be fun. It might not be exciting. Live on a budget. Get a job if you're in the music. Try to teach private lessons a little bit here and there just to subsidize. Don't be crazy. Don't go to parties. Don't live beyond your means. And so I think I got out with my master's with $17,000 or $16,000 in debt, which was very manageable, if you think about it in the long term. And then when I went to UNT, fortunately, that's where I started to get into the private lesson thing.
Yep.
And I was able to kind of pick up on that and subsidize my living a lot through it. So I took out like another $15,000 or $16,000 for 4 years essentially. That's when I was there.
That is still pretty. That's amazing.
And of course, I was on scholarships at UNT as well.
Right.
Academic and music scholarships.
So you have to bring something to the table.
Mm-hmm. You have to,
absolutely.
Yeah. But I know people at UNT that came in there with the intentions of getting their doctorates, and some of them have gone on to great careers in music. People that you guys may know, but they went in there never finishing their doctorate, but were there. They were the perpetual students. They were there for 6-7 years and racked up easily almost $100,000 in debt.
Yep.
Man.
And left with no degree. Now, they went off and got good jobs, some of these guys and gals, but still they're looking at, $80,000, $90,000 in debt. I know some other local players that went to big name schools and came out with $120,000 in debt just because that was the cool place to go. That's where their dream teacher is, or the person that they idoled went to, and they went there for their undergrad and masters and just accrued this crazy amount of debt.
I think it's just the lack of responsibility in the moment. Like, you're not responsible for that. You click the button that says I accept this loan, and you're thinking, well, I don't have to, in 2012, like if I were to accept a scholarship, I didn't have to start paying it off until 2016. 4 years down the road, when you're 18, 19 years old, looks like whatever.
Well, yeah, and you're going to be a millionaire by that point.
It's eternity.
I mean,
in your 18-year-old.
That's kind of how we think,
Yeah.
I'm going to be making, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and maybe y'all didn't think that. I thought that.
I thought I could be making a decent amount of money. Well, I never even took out loans, but that's crazy that you got your doctorate with $34,000. So, can you talk to us a little bit about, was there anything different about University of New Mexico versus UCF versus UNT? Like, I've never met anybody that actually went to New Mexico. I've listened to y'all's recordings over and over and over again with Joe Alessi on Eliminations, but I've never actually talked to somebody. So tell me about your experiences at UNM.
Oh, it was two of the best years of my life. When I moved to New Mexico, I had never been west of the Mississippi River. Living in Florida, I traveled the East Coast, but never west. And so when I moved out there, I thought I had moved to the moon. It was the high desert. It looked like a lunar landscape. Yeah. But I fell in love with it. It's called the Land of Enchantment for a reason. And when you're out there, it's desolate, but it's this beautiful desolation. And the distances between locations is amazing. Kind of like here in Texas, but if you leave Albuquerque and you decide to go to Gallup or Santa Fe, there's nothing between those two towns.
No.
There's nothing. And that just fascinated me. It was just gorgeous. And so the music scene out there is very unique in that it's smaller than it is here in DFW. And you have a lot of good players, but the opportunities are very small. Where here they're a lot larger just because of the larger numbers of people. And then you have the art culture up in Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Which is very different than it is.
That's a unique area.
Very unique, different than it is in Albuquerque. So you'd have people flying in from around the world to play in Santa Fe, but not play in Albuquerque.
That's interesting.
Yeah. There's kind of revitalization in that area right now in the arts. My in-laws have got a cabin near Taos.
Yep.
And so there's some organization, company, something that is kind of doing a revitalization of chamber music in Taos. And so they're bringing people all over the country to come and play in that small little ski valley area. And they'll make appearances in there, Angel Fire. They'll go to Santa Fe. They'll go to some of these places, and it's interesting. But there's not a whole lot there.
No, there's not.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to college, it is what you make of it. In that, one of my bass trombone idols, Charlie Vernon, Chicago Symphony, I think he went to Brevard College, which is actually the same college that my mom went to in Brevard, North Carolina. A very small private college. Very, very, very small. And then I think he went to Georgia or Georgia State. Anyway, it was, two schools that at that time you just wouldn't think of as, powerhouses in music. But look where he ended up. And it wasn't because of the school. And most players I know aren't who they are because of where they went. It's because of who they are and what they invest in their own education there. Because you can go to a very small school with limited opportunities, and if you're focused and dedicated and practice and use all the resources to your advantage, you can come out of there a real monster player ready for the real world.
Right.
So just going to UNT, going to Juilliard does not mean you're going to be successful. I know a lot of people that went to UNT that are not successful, and a lot of people that went to colleges that I've never even heard of that are some of the top players here in DFW.
Yeah.
Right.
I saw that a lot at Baldwin Wallace. Less at CIM, and that was only because well, that's a long story. I just wasn't there to see the people much. But yeah, at BW, there were tons of people that came in with just crazy talent, and they kind of pissed away their 4 years. And like for example, so the musical theater program there is they may be ranked number 1 in the world now. I mean, they send people to Broadway and Hollywood and all these places. But even with that knowledge, one of the guys I went to college with is basically a hermit in Alaska. And, he came in with crazy talent. And I think I literally think he's a hermit in Alaska. It's amazing. You see people that just kind of sit on a park bench all day long and smoke and talk. Yeah. Or I had another friend there with a very talented violinist who unfortunately got involved with a lot of alcohol and marijuana. Yeah. And his life just fell apart.
Yeah. Well, in that track, in fact, I was talking with a good friend of mine recently about UCF. Him and I were trombone players there. About the times that we were there, the amazing players that came out of that school. As I said, no one thinks of UCF today as this musical, institution, powerhouse institution. But at that time, my first teacher, in fact, he taught me when I was in 6th grade. His name was Chris Olka. He's now the tubist of the, I think it's Cincinnati. I think it's with the Cincinnati Symphony. Wow. He was going to UCF at the time. Mm-hmm. He used to play with the Seattle Symphony. So his career took off. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of who was. Trumpet player who him and I were in the same class together. His name was Rob Shayer. He's a trumpet player out in L.A. He's like kind of like Wayne Bergeron's kind of understudy. I mean, he plays on all the big name studio gigs and Dancing with the Stars. I mean, his resume is extremely impressive. I remember hanging out with him at his apartment there in Orlando. Him and I, because he was the lead trumpet player in the jazz band. Mike Roylance, who was
Mike Roylance.
Mike Roylance. Yeah. I knew him when he was working for Walt Disney World playing with the Future Corps. He got hired as an adjunct professor at UCF to teach the tuba and run the tuba euphonium ensemble, which I played in.
That's crazy.
And I remember he was there for a while. I think he got kind of burnt out and tired, and then he was like, "I'm going to go, practice." And he went off to Northwestern and now he's in the Boston Symphony. So in this very short period of time, I was around a lot of people in this little tiny school that went off to do great things. And I even commented that every trombone player in the jazz band that I was there has all gone on to a career in music, which is pretty rare, because a lot of people in the music business in college, I would say maybe 1 or 2 people from an ensemble will actually go on and make their life in music. But the entire trombone section, he stayed in Florida. He's a great salsa Latin player. My other friend is in the Army band up in D.C., and the other one is a trombone player with the Air Force Band down in San Antonio. Is that where it is? Yes, San Antonio. And then I'm here. So it was just a lot of people were very successful at that time.
It's amazing.
To be surrounded by that.
Definitely reminds you that you never want to burn bridges. You
never know who's listening
because you never know who's going to become successful. And gosh, one of the guys that I was a chief rival with in high school was at a rival high school. Was Jason Bergman. Mm-hmm. And, back in high school, I wouldn't have thought that Jason was going to be... he was this kid who I auditioned against the Raw region, and he always beat me, so that, I wanted to, be mad at him and be mean to him.
But he was just that good?
Well, luckily I didn't do anything too stupid.
Yeah.
And so when he was hired as the trumpet professor at UNT, I was like, oh, wow. He's like a thing now. I'm just glad I didn't burn any bridges, and it's amazing how many times that happens.
Yeah,
you never know who's going to hire you, or be the next big thing.
I think we've all made some of those mistakes in our past.
Oh yeah,
I think I know I have.
I've had plenty.
Yeah.
Plenty.
It's easy to get into. I was just thinking about this. So did you know that back in probably around the same time that you graduated, that Weston Sprott and Brad White and, oh my gosh, who's the principal of the San Francisco Symphony? I'm blanking. They all went to the same high school and graduated together.
Really?
Yeah. They went to the same, I think it was a high school somewhere near, I could be totally wrong about this. But they all graduated, and they had an interview with the band director afterwards. And they were like, it would be like having, like, I think he compared it to having Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Dwayne Wade all in your high school basketball team.
Yeah.
That would be crazy.
Yeah, just like, so Met Opera players, second in the Houston Symphony, and the principal of the San Francisco, all graduating together. So, anyways, let's, just for time's sake, I would like to get on to pedagogy. So, when you're teaching your private lessons, let's talk. We talked a little bit about the way you teach beginners. I want to ask you how you formulate. Let's say you've got a freshman in high school that has a lot of potential. Now they're not there yet. They're not all-stars yet. How do you get them from a place to where you can see that? Like, I don't know about you, but you can see potential in players. Like, oh man, you're going to be really, really good if you do these things. I wonder what you do. Like, how much do you focus on fundamentals? How much do you focus on actually making music? What's your philosophy from bringing a freshman to, let's say, a future all-state senior?
The bottom line is you can't be a cookie-cutter teacher. And what I mean by that is I know a lot of my colleagues, they have one set way of doing things, and they teach the same way to every student. I find that I have to be a different teacher to every student for them to be successful. Some students strive on competition and being exposed to new things that challenge them. Some students, they just want to get through band. They're just there because their parents are making them, or they're, so I have to, so some students I have to be a mentor. Some students I have to be a teacher. Some students I have to be someone that works on inspiring them to want to be great. It just depends on the student. And to me, that's what, if you do that right and you're the teacher that they need, they will grow into the player that they're capable of being.
So there's not like a one-size-fits-all method.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's sort of like a one-size-fits-one, which I think that's the exact same way that I use it. I try now. I think, I've this year I started to use Michael Attaway's, it's like a practice guide to get you to where you can play through the all-state music. I think that's genius. And then,
well, thank you.
What I found, it's kind of what I tried to do. I've just never actually organized it like you did. But what I tried to do is, or actually, let me just say it this way. What I've noticed is even as they're learning through his chart, they start to branch out on their own and they play as individuals anyway. So I think that taking each individual student as an individual is how I think we've all experienced some success in our teaching careers, no matter how old or young we are. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I think for me, I was just thinking about this today as I was leaving one of the schools and heading to another, that I feel like so much time outside of teaching, I do spend planning and trying to figure out exactly how am I going to teach a concept to a kid or a class, I find that planning is really important and getting specific. How am I going to do this? And then when I get to that moment where I'm actually teaching it, I just kind of throw it away. Which maybe seem a little weird, but I think it's important to have that spontaneity, to be able to respond to the student needs at the moment. I just know that for me, I am not a good teacher if I haven't at least have that I don't even know what you call it, that foundation or that preparation there. Because if I just go into a class cold, not knowing what the heck I'm going to do, well, that's going to be a train wreck.
Right.
Right.
So there's an element of combining planning with spontaneity at the same time.
Yeah, which for me is actually very different from performing on my instrument.
Right.
And if I were in jazz, it'd probably be a little different because there's room for spontaneity. But I find that when I perform,
especially shout courses.
Right. We'll tell that story here.
I would like to hear that story. I don't know that story.
But yeah, I mean, I in the classical setting, I find that I want everything planned, and then I want to follow that plan.
Right.
And then you gas some things here and there just to make it a little more exciting. But with teaching, it's like I abandon all of it purposely. I'm better if I do that.
Okay. I have one more question for Dr. Oliver on the whole high school subject that I'm curious about. What is the difference between an area level player and an all-stater, in your opinion? Because I'm sure you've taught multiple all-staters. Mm-hmm. Why is a kid an area player and why is a kid an all-stater? Because I feel like it's a very fine line. Well, or it might not be in your opinion. I don't know.
It is a very fine line, and it goes into the small details. It's the little things that people. I think it's this little poster outside of Reynolds, or no, it's on the band hall door as I'm leaving Reynolds Middle School. It's something that says something to the effect of the little details that you don't notice or don't think matter are the reason people take notice. I don't know if you've seen that poster.
Yeah, it says like that.
I teach my kids about what I refer to as the practice pyramid. You have to build a pyramid from the bottom up. You can't start with the tippy top and build down. So the bottom level run is notes and rhythms. Let's just get through this thing at a slow tempo. Let's just know what it sounds like, what is in the piece. Then the next level, we're going to talk about basics of style, dynamics and so forth. And in each tier, as we master each level, we get more and more into the fine details. We're at the very top. We're talking about precision in phrasing, vibrato. How long is the vibrato going to be on this one particular note? When is the cutoff on this note here? Is it going to be on the downbeat? We're going to let it go a little bit for all that kind of fine playing. And that's the difference between all-state and area. A region player is going to have the first 2 tiers down.
Right.
An area player is going to have the first 3, and then an all-state player has to have all 4 or 5, depending on how you divide things up.
I think it's funny that you just said that, because that's whenever I do master classes for the high schoolers especially, I go, hey, look, guys, you want to make region? Here's what you got to do. Play the right notes with the right rhythms with good dynamics with a good sound. Because I feel like, and maybe I'm going a little bit too far with that.
I don't even think you need to have a good sound.
Really?
No.
Okay.
For region? No.
I think it's
right.
Gotta be. Right. I think it's got to be a decent sound.
I think
it's got to be a semi-attractive sound.
In my experience in trombone and euphonium, because of the key signatures that they often pick, if they can play right notes and rhythms, because a lot of the kids, like this year with the euphonium etudes, they're all in tough keys. Yep. They're all in tough keys. I don't have more than 2 kids that can currently play all 3 etudes and know all. Remember, oh yeah, it's a C flat in this piece. Right. Oh yeah, it's an A sharp, because they never play in those keys. So I tell them that if you can just go into the audition and whatever the cut is, if you play with the best sound you can, but hit all the right notes and the right rhythms, you got a decent chance, because 80% of them are going to walk in there still playing A naturals instead of A sharps.
Sad but true.
But then the kids that make area, it's a whole nother ballgame.
Right. So I think that you're making a great point, which is that the difference between area and state is very close. Like a lot of the kids that I know that make area, especially in our region, right? When they go to I think they audition at the Colony High School or Coppell, one of those two. And when you go listen to those players, I mean, we have players who are very good, talented players who are getting like 12th and 13th, which means that. And they're not having bad runs. It's just because the competition is so stacked.
Well, to expand upon that, I've had students that I had no doubt in my mind were going to make All-State.
Okay.
No doubt in my mind. Nobody was playing the etudes better than them. And they don't make it. And I would ask them, kind of like debrief them, what happened? And they might say, well, I chipped this note. I didn't breathe where I was supposed to here. Small little mistakes. But I tell them as well, and I figured this out, that it also depends on the judging. And you know how judging in music is very qualitative. It's not necessarily quantitative, because some judges, for me, I have certain things I listen for.
Right.
So you might get, just because of who they have available, you might get a percussion director sitting in on a trombone audition.
Right.
It's possible. Yeah. And that percussion director is going to be very nitpicky about time. Very nitpicky. And I've sat on panels where someone's sitting there tapping their finger on the desk. But to me, I would have taught the etude, whatever this was, maybe one with a little bit of more of a push and pull. But because they pushed and pulled, that one judge thinks, well, they can't play it in time. No, they're not going to make it.
Right.
And so you have some judges that are listening for tone, some are listening for time, some are listening for, and you can play the piece very, very well, but just because it's not what one judge particularly is into, they rank them. Because I had a student once in his room score. One judge placed him first, one judge placed him third, and the third judge placed him 39th. I can't account for that, except for the fact that one either there was an error or the judge just thought he played too rubato on the lyrical etude and it sounded terrible, I guess. Wow. But so you can't prepare for that. You know, what I tell my students to do, your best bet when it comes to region and state auditions is to prepare what's on the page. You can't be faulted if you play what's on the page.
That's what I tell the kids too.
That's a good point.
Add your own thing. Sometimes people will go, well, can I add vibrato? Can I do this one ornament? I go, no. I said, you can. I said, but you're running a huge risk.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Because
tell them the exact same thing.
Just play what is on the page. I said, if this was your recital or you're doing this as a program in a college, do what. Yeah,
Solo ensemble.
Mm-hmm. Embellish the melody, bring this out, go, interpret the music differently. But when it comes to a region audition, play precisely what's on the page. If it says it's a mezzo piano here and a mezzo forte here, I need to hear a mezzo piano and mezzo forte.
Yeah.
Play what's on the page because they can't fault you.
That is literally lesson number one that I do every single year with the kids when I pass out their band audition music and also their all region music. I say, we need to start by if you dot every I, you cross every T.
Yeah.
And you don't get cute. You're not changing the world with your audition.
No.
So, yeah. And you're exactly right.
You just want to demonstrate I can play what is on the page.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it from a band director standpoint, they're looking to have people in their band that can follow instructions. Mm-hmm. Can you play what is on the page without me having to tell you it's there?
Yeah.
Well, so I think, do you want to talk middle school philosophy real quick? I know we had already talked about we got to make it fun.
This is actually where I feel like I shine the best. I love teaching middle school.
Dude, let's go for it because I would love to gather some information about just middle school pedagogy because I feel like in my studio right now I have either really, really talented folks or some folks who are just kind of falling behind the fray. I don't really have any middle ground players, which may just be how it is. I don't know if that's just the case, but can you talk to us about, take us through the middle schooler's journey? So beginner year, second year, and then your expectations by the time they're getting ready to go to high school.
Well, I always tell the students in their first lesson, I always say that, and this is regardless of what level they're at, I always say the first lesson's a little bit more for me than it is for you. Because I have to figure out what kind of player you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your musical aptitude is. Some students are more intellectual, some are complete oral learners, some are tactile. It just depends, and I have to figure that out relatively fast to create a curriculum for them to advance. The first year students, it's all about, or sixth graders for me, it's all about inspiration. It's all about that musical fascination because that's the first thing that students lose.
Right.
When they first get their instruments out, I always tell students before I start teaching them over the summer, and I'll tell the parents, do not get your instrument out before I get there to the first lesson. I know the trombone's in the case, you got it at home, you want to touch it, don't touch it until I get there.
Yeah.
Don't let me set it up for you, show you the proper way of holding it, because I don't want them to either create a bad habit or to lose a fascination in it. I want them to see it done the right way, to hear me play the first time. And a lot of times I can see their eyes kind of light up. I can play something very simple, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or Mary Had a Little Lamb for them, just to demonstrate what the first 5 notes that they learn can do. And their eyes light up. It's that same experience that I had when I was that little 6th grader. It's like, wow, that is incredible. And as time goes on, that the shininess kind of fades away. And so I struggle with trying to maintain that fascination, always pushing them more and more and more. The 7th grade year is where the competition starts to. I use competition as a enhancement, where of course they all want to be first chair, or they want to make region, or I'm in second band, I want to be in first. What do I got to be? What do I have to do to be in first band? Right. I like healthy competition in music because that is although I love music just as an art form, it is a business. And if a student wants to go on in the high school and be successful, or even go beyond and do what we do, or become a band director, that's the way of the world. So teaching them healthy competition from the very beginning, that you are responsible for what you practice, for how you sound, and use it. And I will even kind of pit students against each other. They all want to be first chair, and so I always tell them, you can beat student A. You just got to do this. Yeah. But I tell student A, student B's coming for you. Yeah. So better watch out.
I've thought a lot about what you're talking about, and I think that just going back to, because I like to think back to my experience in high school. I don't know if you know who Kennedy Powers is.
Mm-hmm. At LD Bell.
So we graduated together.
Yeah, he ended up in the 1 o'clock.
Yeah, by his sophomore year. Good job, Kennedy. But anyway, so we were very competitive against each other, but the attitude when we competed against each other was, hey, we are friends. Mm-hmm. We are making awesome music together, but I'm gonna beat you. You know what I mean? It's like friendly kind of competition. Yeah, absolutely. It's like when Adaway and I were trying to recruit for the brass camp, and it was like I would go into his room and be like, haha, I got number 10, and he'd be like, I got number 11. I'd be like, dang it, we're on each other's team. Yeah. I feel like the only time the competition is unhealthy when it's like you're actually like butting heads with the other person. I think especially at the high school level, high school and middle school level, it should never get there. No. Like if you're really talented, area going state, and you should be just blessed that you have another area going state player with you. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to make that point real quick because I feel like we've.
Well, from a pedagogical standpoint, I tell students that I have the world's worst business model. Okay. And that I am teaching them. My goal is to teach them not to need me. Right. I will teach you a formula. I like that. I will teach you what you need to do. I will teach you how to read music. If you don't know something, I'll teach you how to figure it out. A lot of, for example, high notes. A lot of times students will look in lessons and go, is that a high F? And I'll go, I don't know. Is it? I'm not going to give you the answer. Yeah. Right. Yeah. How do you figure that out? And they go, and they look at the next highest note they know and they count up and they like, okay, it's really an E flat. Okay, there you go. Yeah, you figured it out on your own. You earned the knowledge. You earned the information versus me just giving it to you. It's that old adage: if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man the fish, he eats for a lifetime. Right. I try to do that with every student. I make them work for the knowledge. Now, if they can't figure it out or it's something really more advanced, of course I'll tell them. But I always lead them to the answer. When they have a question, I ask them questions. Yeah. What is this? Think about this before you ask it. Mm-hmm. What, they'll ask a position. For example, what note is it? Oh, it's an E flat. Okay, so what position is E flat down an octave? It's just as a starting third. Like, oh, it's the same, isn't it? Yeah. So just make them think in it outside the box instead of just them just getting the answer. So that's kind of my pedagogical technique with them.
Well, I think that's great. I think it's there's two things that I've picked up on that I think is important, and we've talked about this too. I can just tell by the way that you're talking, you're super enthusiastic about trombone. Like I think you just really love trombone. Yeah. And we've talked about this before. It's hard to teach something that you're not passionate about. Yeah. Like you can fake it and make it because, like let's say you got a family to support and you really need to get money. You can get by, but I think the kids are really inspired by people who, like you and me and Michael, where they can tell from day one that we love what we do, and therefore they should love what they do.
I love it when kids ask me, they go, well, what do you do for a living? I'm like, this? Like, you do this for a living? And the biggest compliment I've ever gotten, and I've had a few students tell me this, they go, I want to be a private lesson teacher too. Mm-hmm. And that's when I tell them, no. You don't want to be a private lesson teacher because it takes a special person to do that. But I mean, you can be very successful at it. But to me, that's the biggest compliment. I think me and Michael were talking before we started the podcast about my history and why I got my doctorate. When I was younger, I wanted to be a college professor. I wanted to be like the people that inspired me. Of course, everybody wants to be the orchestral. I always wanted to be in the Chicago Symphony or New York Phil, and every student has that dream. And then I was like, oh, I want to be a college professor. That sounds really cool. It looks really neat to be around that level of playing. And so I got my doctorate, and I went off and taught college for a little bit. And I realized it's not for me.
Really?
Yeah, it just was
I didn't
not
know
for
you
me.
taught college.
Yeah,
That's cool.
I taught college for a while. I taught applied music. I taught brass history and brass pedagogy. And when I was in my master's, I taught the second jazz band at the University of Mexico. So I've taught ensembles as well. And for me, I always kind of felt like college teaching was more about you and how to enhance your resume, because you're always looking for that next job.
Right.
Everybody. I have a friend that recently got a job over the summer. I think she's a fantastic trumpet player. She landed a good starting professorship, but I know that's not the last place she's going to be. She's going to be there. She's going to do a great job. She's going to work her butt off, and I will expect her to be at a bigger job in a few years.
Right.
So it just goes from there. So you're spending more time inward on yourself instead of advancing the art of trombone playing or trumpet playing or the art of music or the art of pedagogy. It's all about you. What can I get published? It's
right.
What can I, and then that just wasn't what I was into. And so I discovered I never could have imagined myself being the introvert that I am, that I would love teaching kids like I do at the middle school and high school level. It was a passion that I never knew that I would have. So it gives me purpose because I feel like I affect positively the next generation.
Yep.
It's a blessing. And I'm amazed how some people, and you kind of touched the base on this, they just do it as a job. They're like, well, I got to pay the bills. I'll go teach some lessons. And they're not passionate about it. And they just go through these motions. And the kids, I have students that have come to me from other teachers. And I don't like to take students from other teachers. I'm like, I don't want to step on any toes or anything.
Just to clarify, if a student comes to you, you're not taking anybody. Just going to get that out of the way. All right. Right?
Okay. Well, then all your students that have come to me, I'll go ahead and accept them. Then.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
I did take them, all of them. I'm like
just
shoving them. No, I don't want any of them.
But and there are a lot of times what they'll say, and I'll try to ask, just to make sure it's not like a situation where it's maybe they have unrealistic expectations for what lessons are, and the other teacher was doing a fantastic job, because sometimes these people are great. I think are great teachers.
Yep.
And those will say, well, they only do one thing, like all they care about is playing long tones in lessons, which I'm all about playing long tones, all about fundamentals. But I also know you have to do more than just play fundamentals the entire time. Otherwise, a student is going to check out pretty quick.
Right.
Or they say, well, they just don't seem enthusiastic about playing. It's just not what it's obvious they're not passionate about being here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I think for time's sake, really quickly, we've there's one more question, and then we want to talk about your most recent exciting success story.
Okay.
So the question that, and do you have any other questions for him?
No, go ahead.
So the question that I have is, what advice do you have for somebody who, let's say, in the next 2 or 3 years, they're going to go off to begin their undergrad, be it a music ed degree or a music performance degree? Do you have any advice that you would give to them just freely to say, hey, watch out for these obstacles, or if I could go back and do it differently, I would have done this, or any advice that you would have for somebody who's about to enter their undergrad?
Find the school that fits you and your personality the best. Some students, especially being around here in DFW, we have a lot of great music schools, from SMU to UNT, TCU, but not everybody is fit for every school. I have a lot of students that say, I want to go to UNT. And of course, that's my experience around here is UNT. And when I was there, the trombone studio was between 92 and 98 students.
Good Lord.
So army. It's an army.
Wow.
It's a machine.
Crazy.
And some of these students, and some of them are really good, but I'll go, you're going to go to UNT, and you're not necessarily the most extroverted go-get-em person. You're going to get eaten up. You're not maybe you're not mature enough. You just don't have enough life experience. So I would say, well, maybe check out, if money's not an issue, TCU. Check out UT Arlington. They have a good music school.
Right.
Check out some of these other options that are smaller schools that are still going to push you, but you'll kind of ease into from being a high school student to a college student, and make this a transition. And then when you're ready, when you have that 4-year degree under your belt, you've been there, done that, go to UNT, go to Indiana. You know what the system's like now.
Right.
You're ready to do battle. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But as an undergrad, I've seen so many people get washed out of those gigantic schools because you might not study with a professor, because you might study with a TA. There's nothing wrong with that. But as I said, you can make it what you want, but it's kind of more of an uphill battle. You're going to be playing. You might not even make an ensemble. When I was at UNT, I played in the 2 o'clock lab band for 5 semesters. But I know good trombone players that didn't make a lab band. And they have 9 lab bands there. All of them are filled up. Like I didn't make one. You might not make an ensemble. You might be in the bottom trombone choir, and it can be very discouraging, especially if you're an all region player or area player at your high school, and you're kind of the big man on campus, and you go to Indiana or UNT, and now you are the bottom, because you're not just competing against kids your age. You're competing against people with master's degrees, people that are doctoral candidates, people that
may have careers.
In fact, getting kind of if you want to talk about the news, I guess, about me being asked by Dr. Dave Bignosh at TCU to solo with the TCU trombone choir.
Yep.
Him and I got our doctorates at the same time at UNT. He came to UNT already having an established career in Boston. He's subbed with the Boston Pops. He taught at Yale. He taught, I think it was chamber music at Yale. He had this career, and he wanted to advance it by getting his doctorate. He comes into UNT with me, and he's sitting next to me in my ensembles.
That's awesome.
But you know what I'm saying? So, how would a undergrad compete against that? You're not.
You're not. Yeah,
You're not.
That's the right answer. Yeah. So I think that's what we're gonna read off. I've got your Facebook post here. It says I'm gonna start with the second paragraph. It says, today I was invited to be a guest artist and soloist with the TCU Trombone Choir for the upcoming 2020 TCU Trombone Summit hosted by Dr. Dave Bignosh. I would be one of the guest artists featured on the concert and perform Blue Topaz by Tommy Pedersen on bass trombone. The other guest artists are world-class trombone soloists and orchestral musicians. I would be the spotlight of the local musicians and trombonists. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That is I read that post and I was like, sweet.
Yeah, congratulations, Jason. That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm really nervous. I have to go. I've always had issues, and I kind of talk about in that post. I've always never felt worthy of my ability, of performing in front of people. I've always felt undeserving of everything that I have, because I know that there's better musicians than me. There's better bass trombone players than me. And I'm always worried about being judged. And of course, playing for a room of great trombone players, great guest artists, in front of a room of a bunch of trombone students. It's a bunch of trombone geeks.
You're right.
And here I am playing a piece that a lot of them know. It's a pretty famous, bass trombone solo with trombone choir. It's really nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
And so I actually kind of thought about it for a minute before I accepted. I'm like, do I want to put myself under this type of pressure? But I was like, I need to do it. I need to do it for myself.
I think we all suffer from that imposter syndrome. You feel like, if someone just realized that I'm not as important as people say that I am, that then I'll be found out.
I think I say that in that post. I said, I worry every day that my colleagues are going to realize that I don't play in tune, I don't play in time, and I'm not that good, and I'm going to lose all of my gigs.
Which I get, you brought up a really great point. So you do a lot of gigging. Mm-hmm. So how did you, this will be the last thing and we got to go. How did you pick up those gigs? Like a lot of people have questions about that. Like, why do some people gig more than other people? Is it just networking yourself, or obviously you got to have talent?
No, I don't have that. No, I think for the music performance business is not what college does not prepare you for music performance. It runs you through this system of playing solos and juries and that. And I mean, besides this thing at TCU, I've never played a bass trombone solo for money. You know what I'm saying? I haven't done that, but I've played lots of church gigs, lots of orchestral gigs, lots of top 40 band gigs, lots of big band gigs. You know, where I'm just I used to be the bass trombonist with the Glenn Miller Orchestra for a year, toured the United States on that. So I did all of that, but I didn't do what I did in college. Yeah. It's to me this most of the success in the music business is doing just a couple of things. It's show up on time, shut up, play your part, go home.
Okay.
If you do that and you do it consistently, you'll get called back.
Smile and be thankful.
Smile and be thankful.
Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, and like in the top 40 world, you know, I play with a lot of people that are not, I would say, educated musicians. Maybe they're musicians, but they didn't go to school for music. You know, they're computer programmers or they do something else. And they'll complain about certain gigs or certain bands or this or that. And I'd say, does the check cash at the end of the night? If you don't want to be here, don't show up. No one's forcing you to be here.
Right.
I'm not saying that in a mean way. I'm just kind of putting it in perspective.
Right.
If, you know, I agree to play for this money, I'm going to go do my very best, regardless. If I accept it, they're going to get 110% of my effort.
Right.
You know, and if I do that consistently, and if you're just a hard worker, it's amazing what opportunities will come your way.
Right.
You know?
Well, we appreciate Dr. Oliver being on the show.
Absolutely.
It's an honor to have you on. You've always been one of
honor.
those guys. Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, well, it's an interesting perspective for me because I'm a lot younger than you guys, and when I was
keep rubbing that in.
I'm not rubbing it in. I'm making a point. Man. But y'all were the teachers when I was the student, so I've always seen you guys as not to you guys. I never took lessons. I would never take a lesson from you.
You couldn't handle a lesson from me.
Too many lip slurs. But yeah, so it's nice to finally get to like learn from you as a teacher because I'm still learning in my craft and I want to continue learning. So it's awesome to get some perspective from successful teachers and musicians.
Well, I'm humbled that you would think that I'm successful. I just consider myself very, very lucky and blessed.
Yeah.
I don't feel like, as I said before, that I deserve all that I have. I mean, I still can't believe that I perform every weekend, sometimes 2 times a weekend. I have a waiting. My studio's so big, I have a waiting list. I have schools constantly contacting me that say, "Hey, can you please come teach in our district? Can you come do this?" And I have to turn it down. I'm blessed beyond my wildest dreams.
That's awesome.
I can't believe it.
Well, I think we're good to go. Good. To
Yeah,
cap
that's
off.
a great way to cap that off.
Do we count up now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We don't know how to open or close a podcast.
I don't even know how to respond to that.
All right.
So.
We always give the peace out. You face the camera.
Me?
Peace